There is a specific moment in every political coalition's life when the thing that built it becomes the thing that threatens to undo it. Most people miss that moment when it happens, because it doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, in a gas station receipt, in a grocery store aisle, in the face of someone who voted with full confidence 2 years ago and is now doing the math again. That moment is happening right now inside the Republican Party, and the people closest to Donald Trump's political operation know it. Let me give you a single number and then explain why it matters more than anything else in American politics right now. 24%. That is Trump's approval rating on inflation, according to the Fox News poll released on May 21, 2026. Conducted among over 1,000 registered voters between May 15th and May 18th. 24%. Down from 35% in January of this year, down from higher still in early 2025. Now here's what makes that number different from any other presidential approval figure you've seen in recent memory. It's not a Democratic number. It's not an independent number. It's his own voters. The same Fox News poll found that 51% of Republican voters, a majority, now disapprove of Trump's handling of inflation. Republican pollster Darren Shaw, who helps conduct that poll, put it this simply. Make no mistake, it's all about affordability. Independents jumped ship in 2025, and now non-MAGA Republicans and other core constituencies are wavering. That sentence was not written by a Democrat. It was written by a Republican analyst on a Republican-leaning network about Republican voters. When you see that, you understand something important. This is not ordinary political turbulence. This is the first sign of structural stress inside the coalition that brought Trump back to power. To understand what's fracturing, you have to understand what was built. Trump's 2024 campaign was not primarily an ideological campaign. It wasn't even really a policy campaign in the traditional sense. It was an economic contract with the American people. Specific, personal, felt. He told working families their groceries were unaffordable. He was right. He told them energy prices were squeezing their commutes and their small businesses. He was right. He told them inflation had quietly erased the purchasing power of ordinary Americans. He was right. And then he promised to fix it. Fast. That promise resonated because it was emotionally true before it was statistically true. People didn't need a chart. They felt it every time they opened a bill that looked 10% higher than the one before it. That feeling became a political force. And that force carried him back into the Oval Office. But governing is not campaigning. Eventually, the promise collides with the price tag. And right now, in May 2026, the price tag is winning. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that in April 2026, the Consumer Price Index rose 3.8% year over year. That is the highest rate since May 2023. On a monthly basis, prices climbed 0.6% in April alone, following a 0.9% surge in March, the largest single-month increase since June 2022. Grocery prices rose 0.7% in just 1 month. Beef prices are up 14.8% year over year. Real average hourly wages, the actual purchasing power of a paycheck, fell 0.3% annually. In other words, things cost more, and paychecks buy less. That is not a talking point. That is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There is one number that cuts through every political message, every rally speech, every social media post, every cable news panel. The price on the gas station sign. Drivers cannot avoid it. They see it multiple times a week. It requires no interpretation, no political framing, no pundit to explain what it means. It is immediate. It is personal. And right now, it is brutal. On February 27, 2026, the day before the U.S. and Israel launched joint military operations against Iran, the national average for a gallon of regular gasoline was approximately $3.07. Today, the national average sits at $4.50. That is nearly a 50% increase in less than 3 months. According to AAA, it's the first time American drivers have collectively paid above $4 a gallon since 2022. In some states, it's far worse. California, $5.83. Ohio, above $4.70. Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, states that are supposed to be reliable Republican territory, saw some of the steepest percentage increases in the country, between 45% and 52% since the war began. The Iran conflict, and its disruption of tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has done in 3 months what years of post-pandemic recovery had slowly begun to undo. It has made energy expensive again. And when energy is expensive, everything that moves, ships, refrigerates, or grows becomes more expensive too. Groceries, airfare, utility bills, the UPS delivery on your doorstep. One economist at GasBuddy said in March, "This is really quickly going to ignite additional inflation." He was right, and the April CPI report confirmed it. The political consequence of that is direct. Americans see a $4 gas sign and they don't think about global oil markets, geopolitical supply disruptions, or the complexities of OPEC plus production decisions. They think about the man who told them prices would go down. Here is what Republican strategists are grappling with privately, even as they speak confidently in public. The coalition Trump assembled in 2024 was not a monolith. It was a coalition of grievances held together by one shared belief: that he could fix the economy faster than the alternative. Rural conservatives, working-class voters in the Midwest, suburban moderates who reluctantly chose him over economic anxiety, non-college-educated men and women who had watched their cost of living outpace their wages for years. Even some Latino voters and Black voters who prioritized economic performance over party loyalty. What held these groups together was not ideology, it was a shared pain and a shared expectation of relief. Now look at where the cracks are appearing. The Fox News poll shows Trump's approval among Republicans overall has fallen to 80%, a second-term low, down from 84% in March and 92% in early 2025. Among non-MAGA Republicans, only 43% believe his policies will help the country. Brookings Institution noted in April that for the first time since 2010, Democrats are now more trusted than Republicans to handle the economy. That is not a minor shift. That is the collapse of one of the Republican Party's most durable advantages. And according to The Hill, senior Republican lawmakers are growing visibly alarmed. Retiring Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, representing one of the most contested Senate battlegrounds, said it plainly. "If we are where we are today in the beginning of the second quarter of 2026, then I think we're in for a really rough time in November." That is a Republican senator talking about a Republican president inside a Republican conference. When a political coalition begins criticizing its own leader on the issue that created the coalition, that is the definition of structural stress. Let me take you to a place the political media rarely goes when it talks about inflation. Not Washington, not a cable news studio, a gas station in Tennessee, a grocery store in Kansas, a small trucking company in Nebraska trying to figure out what a 50% increase in diesel costs does to its margins. Rural America is where Trump's political foundation sits deepest. And rural America is where inflation hits the hardest, because everything in a rural economy depends on fuel. Farmers pay more to operate equipment, trucking costs rise. Fertilizer prices, already elevated, face further pressure as supply chains remain unstable. Feed costs for livestock rise. Local businesses absorb those increases and pass them to consumers who are already stretched. In states like Tennessee, Idaho, Mississippi, and Kentucky, states that Trump won by wide margins in 2024, gas prices have risen between 45% and 52% since February 28th. That is not an abstraction. That is an economy reorganizing itself around a new cost structure, and ordinary people absorbing every penny of it. The tariff situation compounds this further. Import duties that were framed as economic leverage have produced a real and visible consequence. Imported goods cost more. Supply chains in certain manufacturing sectors remain disrupted. Businesses relying on imported materials pass costs down the chain. And the Supreme Court striking down the Liberation Day tariffs in early 2026 created additional economic uncertainty that businesses and consumers alike are still absorbing. The political danger for Republicans is not that one group of voters is angry. It's that multiple groups, rural, suburban, working class, are feeling the same financial pressure simultaneously, from multiple directions, with no clear relief in sight. I want to spend a moment on the psychology here because I think it's the most underestimated factor in what's unfolding. Inflation is not just an economic condition. It is an emotional experience. When prices rise persistently, people don't just feel poorer, They feel something more destabilizing than that. They feel that the future has become unreliable. Plans they made, saving for a house, starting a family, planning retirement, start to feel fragile in ways that no speech can reassure away. A recent AP NORC poll found that 45% of American adults are extremely or very concerned about being able to afford gasoline in the coming months. That number was 30% right after Trump won the 2024 election. In 6 months, concern about basic fuel affordability has grown by half again. That shift, from optimism to financial anxiety, is one of the most politically consequential movements a polling number can show. Because voters who feel financially optimistic give presidents the benefit of the doubt. They absorb bad news. They wait for improvement. Voters who feel financially anxious stop giving that benefit of the doubt. They stop waiting. They start assigning blame. And once blame is assigned to the same people who made the promises, the political math changes fundamentally. Consumer sentiment, according to multiple trackers, has hit levels not seen since some of the worst economic moments of recent years. And economic pessimism has a self-reinforcing quality that policymakers fear most. When consumers pull back, businesses slow down, hiring caution spreads, and the economic conditions that cause the pessimism become worse. The 2026 midterms are now roughly 5 months away, and the environment Republicans are campaigning in looks nothing like the environment they imagined when 2025 began. Brookings has identified Democrats as having serious pickup opportunities in North Carolina, Maine, Alaska, and Ohio. Iowa and Texas, states that were supposed to be safe Republican territory, are no longer considered sure bets. The 19 most vulnerable Republican House districts are concentrated in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Midwest. Suburban, educated, economically anxious communities that decide their votes based on whether life feels better or worse than it did 2 years ago. History is unambiguous about this dynamic. Presidents whose economic approval collapses in the year before midterms typically lose House seats. The only question is, how many? And the Republican Party faces a particular trap in 2026 that is harder than what previous parties have faced. Their strongest cultural and ideological messaging, immigration, border security, national identity, still resonates with the MAGA base. But those are not the voters who decide competitive suburban districts. Voters in swing districts in suburban Ohio, suburban Pennsylvania, suburban Arizona, those voters don't make their decisions based on immigration messaging. They make them based on whether their insurance costs went up, whether their rent is manageable, whether their kid's grocery bill looks possible on a single income. And right now, those answers are working against Republicans. Here is the problem that sits at the center of all of this, and the reason it is harder to solve than typical political difficulties. Inflation does not respond to messaging. A president can dominate the news cycle for a week. He can hold rallies. He can deliver speeches that remind people of what he promised. He can attack his opponents. He can redirect media attention to other issues. None of that changes what a gallon of milk costs on Thursday morning. Prices that rise persistently do not fall quickly. Energy markets respond to global supply dynamics, not domestic political calendars. Supply chains disrupted by a war in the Middle East take months. Some economists say 6 to 9 months at minimum, to normalize even after the conflict ends. Interest rates remain elevated because the Federal Reserve, watching inflation rise back toward 4%, has no room to cut. The economic pollster Darren Shaw said the quiet part out loud. Independents jumped ship in 2025, and now non-MAGA Republicans and other core constituencies are wavering. That wavering is not about ideology. It is about groceries, gas, rent, and the gap between what was promised and what is being experienced. Political trust, once eroded on the issue that created the trust, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild before an election. Because rebuilding it requires not just a better message, it requires better prices. And prices are one of the few things in American political life that no president fully controls. There is a pattern in political history that is as consistent as almost any other. Coalitions are built on promises, and they are stress-tested by reality. The most durable coalitions survive that stress test, not because the promises are always kept, but because voters believe improvement is genuinely coming, and that the people in power understand their pain and are honestly addressing it. The most fragile coalitions fracture when voters stop believing that. When they conclude that the gap between the promise and the reality is not a delay, but a permanent condition. Right now, Republican strategists are asking a version of that question in every competitive district in the country. They're watching inflation at 3.8%, gas above $4 nationally, grocery prices climbing month after month, and real wages losing ground. They're watching their own voters, in their own party's polling on their own party's network, register majority disapproval of the president's handling of the most important issue in their lives. And they're doing the math. The months ahead will determine whether this is a difficult chapter in an otherwise stable political story, or whether it becomes the inflection point where the coalition that was assembled around economic promise begins coming apart because that promise is the one thing the coalition cannot survive losing. Voters will make that judgment in November. They will not make it based on what they hear from Washington. They will make it based on what they see at the gas station, what they feel at the checkout line, what they calculate at the end of every month when the bills come in and the balance doesn't add up. Those are the places where political reality actually lives. And right now, those places are not telling a comfortable story.